how we go. So we were talking about, first of all, the issue of belts. Second thing we were going to look at is, I know everybody is tempted to do it at a beginner stage, but blocking.
Yeah, and I think that this mindset, one of my students only said this to me 2 nights ago. He was saying, how come that we're doing these blocks in our patterns and then we're not blocking in our sparring? And it's a great question, especially from a young kid who like trying to explain the difference. There is no correlation between patterns and sparring, although people might think there is a link there. Ideally, there's a sport and there's a martial arts side. Of course, you can compete in patterns in sport, but you don't need to be blocking in your sparring. And the reason is that it sets you a step behind. So if you block, you're a step behind all the time. So ideally, you want to use your footwork, your movement, and avoiding skills to not get hit, rather than blocking, because you're a step behind. You can't do two things at one time. You can't block and then be ahead of the game as such. And I think we have a couple of examples why it's not the best idea to block, but it is something that we definitely see from beginners and people who are just learning in ITF. So if you can avoid this one, it will set you up. And it's kind of linked to another one that we have lined up for today as well. So once you see what we have lined up, it will link, and we can put that together.
For sure. And I mean, I suppose that the first problem with blocking is you're committing yourself to stay in place. And we've kind of taken this one as a, forearm guarding block, starting position, usually something that we don't want to see. It's not a great idea to be that static. But the point of the shots that are the ones that we're showing just here is none of these shots are actually possible if you take the time to stop and block. So the reason that there's actually an advantage while they're countering, you can see sometimes there's a little bit of an assist or a cover hand on the way in.
Yeah.
But it's because you're blending with your opponent's technique. So they're coming forward and you're meeting them in the middle. You're going high while they're going low. You're going round while they're going straight. And what it does is it allows you to meet them while they're on one leg, while they're off balance, while they're in motion. And then it can be that much more effective.
Yeah, because you can't block and stay there and then be ready for the next action, because they're already after starting their next action. The sport is too quick for that. So it's very important that you realize if you're blocking that maybe you can do one arm to close the distance, as you maybe like parry or block down with one hand and shoot a technique of your own. For example, countering a side kick, you might carry it down with your front hand and come in with the backhand. That's perfectly fine. But when you just stop, hold static and just block and stay there, then that's not going to work in our sport, and you're going to realize that pretty quick. So the faster you can get out of that habit, the better. You try to use your footwork.
And you can use that almost as a mental cue. So it's giving you feedback on your own sparring, even if the coach hasn't done it. So if you've found yourself having to block because you were just in the wrong place when the technique arrived, it's usually a good sign that, oh, my movement wasn't good. I was too static. I was predictable. There was something gone wrong that I was stuck there. So, we kind of have,
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, in order of priority, it's like, well, if you can counter directly, great. If you can move and avoid, okay, well, that's not too bad. If you're standing there and getting blocking, usually what happens next is the next thing they throw hits you. So the block is only like a temporary reprieve. It's like that little bit where you're at the edge of the cliff and waving your arms before you go off. It's, it hasn't stopped everything from happening. It's just a little bit of a pause before the bad stuff gets to you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a timing thing as well, isn't it? It's like if you block, you're just behind on the timing, and that's why that happens. It's like you give the other person the control of like almost the tempo of the match, and they're almost a step ahead.
And Mike is just pointing out, when you're new to sparring, blocking was part of the fear factor, but after a good few hits, blocks didn't work. And it's true, because overall, when you're new to sparring, you are tense. When you're tense, you're less likely to be moving appropriately on your feet, and so you get caught. You get caught on the spot, and you are, you borrow that phrase, you're a sitting duck. So once you've been caught flat-footed, you're in a lot of trouble. And so that's another reason again that we wouldn't encourage the blocking.